Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Robert Hayes had always felt sick to his stomach from the antiseptic stench of Oakwood General Hospital. But tonight it was like being physically attacked. He sat next to his daughter Lily's still body, her 17-year-old face white against the stark white pillow, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The only sound that broke the oppressive silence was the beep of the machines in their mechanical rhythm. Less than an hour ago, Dr. Evans had said, "There's little chance she'll wake up," his words piercing Robert like a sharp knife. Lily's car was T-boned at the intersection close to her high school by an intoxicated driver who fled with minor injuries. Lily had not been as fortunate. Robert's construction worker frame was hunched with fatigue as he raked his calloused hands through his graying hair. After 22 years of marriage and 18 years of fatherhood, he found himself witnessing his only child's struggle for her life while machines breathed for her. Teresa said softly, her voice hoarse from crying, "I'm going to get some coffee." His 22-year wife appeared just as broken as he was. Her makeup was streaked with tears, and her normally flawless blonde hair was unkempt. "Do you want anything?" Without raising his gaze, Robert shook his head. "Just keep in close proximity." He was left alone with Lily and the steady beat of the ventilator as the sound of her heels clicking against the linoleum faded down the hallway. He reached over to adjust her pillow, trying to make her more comfortable, even though the doctors said she couldn't feel anything. As he lifted her head gently, a piece of paper crinkled beneath the hospital gown. Robert frowned, carefully extracting what appeared to be a folded note that had somehow gotten caught in her clothing. His hands trembled as he unfolded it, recognizing Lily's careful handwriting immediately. "Dad, if you're reading this, check locker 89 at my school to find the truth about Mom and Mr. Monroe. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. I love you, Lily." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. David Monroe, Lily's AP English teacher. Robert had met him at parent-teacher conferences and even shared a beer with the man at the school's fundraising barbecue last spring. David was married to a woman named Beatrice and had 2 young kids of his own. Robert's vision blurred as rage coursed through his veins. His hands crumpled the note before he caught himself, smoothing it out carefully. Lily had known. His little girl had discovered something that had torn her world apart, and she'd been carrying this burden alone. The timing of the accident suddenly took on a sinister new dimension. Lily had been driving home from school at an unusual time, 3:47 p.m. According to the police report, she should have been in drama club practice until 5. Robert's jaw clenched as he stared at his daughter's bruised face. Had she been upset? Distracted? Racing home to confront someone? When Teresa returned with 2 steaming cups of hospital coffee, Robert was staring out the window at the parking lot, the note safely tucked into his wallet. "Any change?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "No," Robert replied, his voice steady despite the hurricane building inside his chest. "Nothing yet." But as he watched his wife's reflection in the window, saw the way she kept checking her phone and how her eyes wouldn't quite meet his, Robert Hayes began planning. He had built his construction company from nothing through sheer determination and an understanding that some foundations needed to be completely torn down before you could build something better. It was time to do some demolition work. Robert Hayes had always been a man who finished what he started. At 45, he built Hayes Construction from a one-man operation with a borrowed truck into a company that employed 37 people across Oakwood County. He understood blueprints, load-bearing walls, and the importance of a solid foundation. What he was about to discover would shake everything he'd built his life on. The next morning, Robert left Teresa at the hospital with strict instructions to call if Lily's condition changed. "I need to go home and shower, maybe grab some clean clothes," he told her, watching as relief flickered across his wife's face. He'd been studying that face for 22 years, cataloging every expression, every tell. The relief was new. Instead of going home, Robert drove straight to Oakwood High School. As a major contractor who'd renovated half the school's facilities over the past 5 years, he had maintained friendly relationships with the maintenance staff. George Richardson, the head custodian, had worked with Robert on the new gymnasium project. "Robert, hell of a thing about Lily," George said, shaking his head as he unlocked the school's main entrance. "How's she doing?" "Fighting," Robert replied simply. "George, I need a favor. Lily left something in her locker, and Teresa asked me to grab it. Think you could help me out?" George's weathered face creased with sympathy. "Of course, buddy. Which locker?" 89. As they walked through the empty hallways, Robert's mind wandered to his family's history. He'd met Teresa when she was 21 and he was 23. Both of them were young and hungry for something better than Oakwood had to offer. She'd been working as a secretary at the county courthouse, dreaming of bigger things. He'd been a laborer then, working for someone else's company, dreaming of his own. They'd built their life together piece by piece. The modest house on Elm Street that Robert had personally renovated, the successful business that had allowed Teresa to quit her job and focus on being a mother, and Lily, their miracle baby who'd arrived after 3 heartbreaking miscarriages. "Here we go," George said, working the master key. Locker 89. The locker door swung open, revealing typical teenage chaos. Textbooks, makeup, a spare sweatshirt. But taped to the inside of the door was an envelope marked for Dad only in Lily's handwriting. Robert's hands were steady as he took the envelope, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Thanks, George. I owe you one. Just take care of that girl of yours," George replied, clasping Robert's shoulder. In his truck, parked in the school's empty lot, Robert opened the envelope. Inside were 3 printed emails, 2 photographs, and another handwritten note from Lily. "Dad, I printed these from Mom's laptop when she left it open. The photos are from Mom's phone. I saw them when she asked me to check a text while she was driving. I've been sick about this for weeks. I don't know what to do. I love you both, but you deserve to know. Lily." The emails painted a picture that made Robert's vision go red around the edges. 6 months of correspondence between Teresa and David Monroe. This wasn't just an affair. It was a relationship that had been building towards something permanent. "Robert suspects nothing," one email read. "He's so focused on the Morrison project that he barely notices when I'm gone. We could be more careful, but honestly, I think he's too dense to figure it out even if we weren't." David's response was equally damning. "Beatrice is the same way. Too busy with her book club and tennis lessons to pay attention. Sometimes I think we could run away together, and they wouldn't notice for weeks." But it was the final email that made Robert's hands shake with rage. "David, I've been thinking about our conversation. You're right. Lily's almost graduated. Once she's off to college, there's nothing keeping me here. Robert's life insurance policy would set us up nicely if something were to happen. Accidents on construction sites aren't exactly uncommon." The photographs were intimate shots of his wife and David Monroe in what Robert recognized as the bedroom of the Riverside Motel. In one, Teresa was wearing the diamond necklace Robert had given her for their 20th anniversary. Robert sat in his truck for 20 minutes, reading and rereading the evidence. His daughter had been carrying this knowledge, this poison, for weeks. She'd been protecting him, trying to find a way to tell him that wouldn't destroy their family completely. Now Lily was fighting for her life, and Robert was left with the bitter understanding that his marriage had been a lie. But more than that, his wife and her lover had been discussing his murder. The Robert Hayes who'd sat in that hospital room the night before would have confronted Teresa, demanded explanations, maybe even tried to save their marriage. But that man had died the moment he'd read his wife's casual discussion of making him a convenient accident statistic. The man who drove away from Oakwood High School was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that some structures were too fundamentally damaged to repair. They needed to be demolished completely. And Robert Hayes was very good at demolition. As he drove back toward the hospital, Robert began to plan. Teresa and David thought they were clever, thought they'd covered their tracks. They had no idea that Lily had been watching, learning, documenting. Most importantly, they had no idea what Robert was capable of when someone threatened his family. That was about to change. Robert Hayes had learned early in his construction career that the most dangerous buildings were the ones that looked solid from the outside. You could shore up walls, replace broken windows, and even gut entire floors, but if the foundation was rotten, the whole structure would eventually collapse. His marriage, he was beginning to understand, had been built on a foundation of lies. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at 2 a.m. Robert sat across from Dr. Evans, Lily's neurosurgeon, nursing his third cup of coffee, while the doctor explained the complexities of traumatic brain injury. "The next 48 hours are critical," Dr. Evans was saying. "The swelling has stabilized, but we won't know the extent of cognitive damage until she regains consciousness." If she regains consciousness. Robert nodded, projecting the image of a concerned father hanging on every word. Inside, his mind was working through blueprints of a different sort. "Doctor, I need to ask you something in confidence. If Lily does wake up, will she remember everything that happened before the accident? Memory issues are common with this type of injury, but there's no way to predict the pattern," Dr. Evans replied. "She might remember everything perfectly, or she might have gaps. Some patients lose hours, others lose days or weeks." Robert absorbed this information. If Lily woke up with her memory intact, she'd remember the burden she'd been carrying. If she didn't remember, she'd be spared the knowledge of her mother's betrayal. Either way, Robert now had something Teresa and David didn't know he possessed. Documentation of their affair and their plans. "Mr. Hayes." Dr. Evans was studying him with concern. "Are you all right?" "Just tired," Robert replied. "It's been a long day." When he returned to Lily's room, Teresa was asleep in the reclining chair, her phone clutched in her hand even in sleep. Robert sat in the visitor's chair and opened his laptop, connecting to the hospital's guest Wi-Fi. For the next 2 hours, While his wife slept and his daughter fought for her life, Robert researched David Monroe. David had been teaching at Oakwood High for 8 years. He'd moved to town from Phoenix after what local newspaper archives described as an employment dispute at his previous school. Reading between the lines of the sanitized articles, Robert suspected David had left Phoenix under a cloud of suspicion. More interesting was David's wife, Beatrice Elliott Monroe. She'd inherited a substantial trust fund from her grandmother, enough that David's teacher's salary was essentially play money. They lived in a house worth 3 times what a teacher could afford, and Beatrice's social media showed a lifestyle funded by old money. Robert also discovered something else. Beatrice Monroe had hired Hayes Construction 2 years ago for a pool house renovation. Robert remembered the job vaguely. David had been home during most of the work, asking questions about foundation requirements and load calculations. At the time, Robert had assumed the man was just curious. Now, he wondered if David had been studying Robert, learning his habits and his schedule. At dawn, Teresa stirred in her chair. "Any change?" she asked. The same question she'd been asking every few hours. "No change," Robert replied, closing his laptop. "Teresa, we need to talk about practical things. I should probably go home today, shower, check on the business. Maybe you should do the same." His wife's face brightened slightly. "Actually, that might be good. I should call the school. Let them know I won't be coming in today." Teresa worked part-time as a substitute teacher, a job that gave her plenty of flexible scheduling. Flexible enough, Robert thought grimly, for afternoon motel visits. "I also think we should reach out to Lily's friends," Robert continued, watching his wife's face carefully. "Maybe some of them would want to visit when she's ready for visitors. Do you know if she's been having any problems lately? Trouble with friends, boys, school stress?" Teresa's composure slipped for just a moment, a tightening around her eyes that Robert might have missed if he hadn't been looking for it. "Not that I know of. She's been a little quiet lately, but, teenagers." Robert nodded. "I'll swing by the school anyway, talk to her teachers. Sometimes they notice things we miss." "I don't think that's necessary," Teresa said quickly. "Mr. Monroe called yesterday to ask about Lily. He was very concerned." "That was thoughtful of him," Robert replied evenly. "I should thank him personally." The look that flashed across his wife's face lasted less than a second, but Robert caught it. Fear. As Robert prepared to leave the hospital, he mentally reviewed what he knew. Teresa and David had been conducting their affair for at least 6 months. They'd been careless enough that Lily had discovered them. They had discussed Robert's death as a convenient solution to their problem. And now, with Lily fighting for her life, they thought they were safe. Robert Hayes had spent his career understanding how things fit together, how pressure points worked, and how to bring down structures efficiently and completely. Over the next few days, he would demonstrate to his wife and her lover that they'd underestimated the wrong man. The foundation of their comfortable little affair was about to be demolished. Robert Hayes had always believed that patience was a contractor's greatest tool. Rush a job and you'd spend twice as long fixing mistakes. Take your time, plan every detail, and the work would be clean, permanent, and impossible to undo. He was about to apply that philosophy to the complete destruction of 2 lives. 3 days after discovering Lily's evidence, Robert sat in his office at Hayes Construction, surrounded by project folders and building permits. To anyone watching, he appeared to be a devoted father catching up on work while his daughter recovered. In reality, he was orchestrating the most important demolition project of his career. His first call was to Mikey Middleton, a private investigator who'd helped Robert track down contractors who'd stolen equipment over the years. Mikey operated out of a strip mall office in the next county and had a reputation for thoroughness and discretion. "Robert, hell of a thing about Lily. How's she doing?" "Fighting," Robert replied, the answer he'd given everyone. "Mikey, I need your help with something sensitive. I think my wife is having an affair." "Ah, buddy, I'm sorry to hear that. You want me to confirm it?" "I need more than confirmation. I need everything. Bank records, credit card statements, phone records, hotel receipts. I need to know every place they've been, every conversation they've had, every plan they've made." Mikey's tone grew serious. "That's going to take some time and cost some money." "Money's not an issue." Robert paused. "Mikey, there's something else. I have reason to believe they've discussed harming me. I need evidence that would hold up in court." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Robert, if you're in danger." "I'm not in immediate danger," Robert cut him off. "But I need to protect myself and my daughter. Can you do it? Give me 2 weeks. I'll get you everything." Robert's second call was to Kevin Horton, a real estate attorney who'd handled several property acquisitions for Hayes Construction. Robert had helped Kevin renovate his downtown office in exchange for legal services, and the man owed him favors. "Kevin, I need you to quietly prepare divorce papers. I want everything. The house, the business, Lily's college fund. I want my wife to walk away with nothing." "Robert, I have to advise you that Michigan is a no-fault state. Even with adultery, she's entitled to. Not if she's been planning to murder me for the insurance money, Robert interrupted. I'll have evidence. I need you to be ready to move fast when I give you the word. His third call required more delicacy. Beatrice Monroe answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Mrs. Monroe, this is Robert Hayes. I worked on your pool house a couple of years back. Of course. How's your daughter? David told me about the accident. We've been praying for her. Robert wondered if David had also told his wife about his plans to run away with his student's mother. She's stable. Thank you. Actually, that's why I'm calling. The hospital bills are going to be substantial, and I'm thinking about selling some assets. I remember you mentioning that you might be interested in buying that vacant lot behind your property. The lot in question was a 3-acre parcel that Robert had purchased as an investment 5 years earlier. It backed up to the Monroe property and would be perfect for someone wanting privacy. Oh, that's interesting timing, Beatrice said. David and I were just discussing expanding our garden. What are you asking? Robert quoted a price 20% below market value, enough to seem desperate but not enough to raise suspicion. I need to move fast, so I'm willing to negotiate. Let me talk to David and get back to you. After hanging up, Robert smiled grimly. The lot was worthless to him now, but selling it would serve multiple purposes. It would give him a reason to interact with both Monroe and his wife. It would make him appear financially vulnerable, and most importantly, it would make David Monroe very, very confident. That evening, Robert returned to the hospital carrying a bag of Teresa's favorite Thai food. His wife looked tired but relieved to see him. Any news from the school? She asked as they sat beside Lily's bed. Mr. Monroe called today, Robert said casually. Wanted to know how Lily was doing. He seemed really broken up about it. Teresa's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. That's sweet of him. He's always been fond of Lily. Yeah, he invited me to have coffee tomorrow. Wants to discuss setting up some kind of scholarship fund in Lily's honor. Robert watched his wife's face carefully. I thought that was a nice gesture. The lie came easily, and Teresa's reaction confirmed what Robert had suspected. Her face went pale and she set down her food. Maybe that's premature, she said quickly. I mean, Lily's going to be fine. She doesn't need a memorial scholarship. It wouldn't be a memorial, just a scholarship for students interested in English literature. Mr. Monroe thinks Lily would have wanted to help other kids who love reading. Robert could see his wife's mind racing, trying to figure out what David might say, what he might reveal. She was trapped between wanting to protect her lover and not being able to explain her concern. I just think we should focus on Lily's recovery right now, Teresa said finally. You're probably right, Robert agreed. I'll tell him we're not ready to discuss it yet. The relief on his wife's face was almost comical. As Robert watched her resume eating, he reflected on how thoroughly he'd misjudged the woman he'd loved for over 2 decades. The Teresa he'd married had been ambitious but honest, dreaming of a better life but willing to work for it. This woman was someone else entirely. Someone who could discuss his murder over email while sitting in their daughter's hospital room. Lily stirred slightly in her bed, the first movement she'd made in days. Both Robert and Teresa immediately focused on their daughter, but Robert was thinking about something else. When Lily woke up, she'd want to know if her father had seen her note, and Robert would be ready with an answer. David Monroe was exactly the kind of man Robert had expected. Handsome in an academic way, with the soft hands of someone who'd never done real work. They sat across from each other at the Rosewood Cafe, Oakwood's attempt at sophisticated dining, discussing Lily's condition while Robert studied his daughter's English teacher with the cold assessment of a predator. She's such a bright girl, David was saying, his voice carrying just the right note of concern. Her essay on Wuthering Heights last semester was graduate-level work. She has real insight into human nature. More than you know, Robert thought grimly. Lily had certainly demonstrated insight into David's nature. Her mother and I appreciate how much you've encouraged her writing, Robert replied. Teresa mentions you've been very supportive. A slight flush crept up David's neck. Teresa is... she's a wonderful woman. Very devoted to Lily. Yes, she is. Robert sipped his coffee, letting the silence stretch. We've been married 22 years next month. Amazing how time flies. David shifted uncomfortably. That's wonderful. Beatrice and I have been married 12 years. Not quite as impressive. Different generations, I suppose. Beatrice seems happy, though. I ran into her at the grocery store yesterday. She mentioned you two are thinking about expanding your garden. This was another lie, but Robert watched David's reaction carefully. The man's face brightened with what looked like genuine affection when discussing his wife. She's been wanting to do more landscaping. The property has so much potential. David paused. Actually, I heard you might be selling that lot behind our place. Possibly. Hospital bills, you know? Robert projected exactly the right amount of worried resignation. I hate to sell it, It's a good investment, but Lily's care has to come first. Of course, of course. David leaned forward, his concern obviously genuine. Robert, if there's anything Beatrice and I can do to help, I know what it's like to worry about money when family is involved. For a moment, Robert glimpsed the man David might have been. Someone capable of real empathy and kindness. It made what Robert was planning feel almost like a public service. Actually, there might be something, Robert said. I'm liquidating some assets, and I could use advice from someone with financial experience. Beatrice mentioned she handles investments. She's very good with money, David confirmed. Inherited some financial sense along with her grandmother's trust fund. I'm sure she'd be happy to help. Robert filed away the information about Beatrice's inheritance. Maybe the three of us could have dinner sometime this week when things settle down with Lily. I'll talk to Beatrice tonight, David promised. As they parted ways in the cafe parking lot, David placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. Robert, I want you to know that if there's ever anything at all, you need help with, you can count on me. Lily is special to all of us. Robert managed what he hoped looked like a grateful smile. Thank you, David. That means more than you know. Driving back to the hospital, Robert reflected on the interesting dynamics he'd observed. David Monroe wasn't the calculating villain Robert had expected. He seemed genuinely fond of his wife, genuinely concerned about Lily, and apparently felt real guilt about his affair with Teresa. That guilt would make him predictable. Beatrice Monroe, on the other hand, was an unknown quantity. Wealthy, intelligent, and by all accounts, devoted to her husband. Robert wondered how she'd react when she learned what David had been doing during his late faculty meetings. That evening, Robert found Teresa in Lily's room, holding their daughter's hand and speaking softly. For a moment, the scene looked like every parent's nightmare. A mother keeping vigil beside her injured child. Then Robert noticed that Teresa was typing on her phone with her free hand. Any change? He asked, taking his usual seat. She squeezed my hand earlier, Teresa said, looking up hopefully. Dr. Evans thinks it's a good sign. Robert nodded, pulling out his own phone. Oh, I had coffee with Mr. Monroe today. He's really concerned about Lily. Teresa's fingers stopped moving on her phone screen. That was nice of him. What did you two talk about? Lily's education mostly. He thinks she should apply for more scholarships. Apparently, her writing is exceptional. Robert paused. He also mentioned that his wife might be able to help us with some financial planning. Medical bills and all that. I don't think we need. Teresa, we might be looking at hundreds of thousands in medical costs. Robert interrupted. Lily could need rehabilitation, special care. If David's wife can help us make smart decisions about liquidating assets, we should listen. His wife's face had gone pale. What assets are you thinking about liquidating? The business, maybe? Some of the investment properties? The house, if it comes to that. Robert watched his wife's expression carefully. Whatever it takes to give Lily the best possible care. Teresa stared at him in shock. Robert, you can't be serious. The business is your life's work. Lily is my life's work, Robert replied simply. Everything else is just stuff. For the first time since he discovered her betrayal, Robert saw something that might have been genuine emotion in his wife's face. Not love, he was past believing in that, but something that looked like regret. We'll figure something out, she said softly. There has to be another way. Robert took her hand, noting how she flinched slightly at his touch. I hope so, but I want you to know that I'd give up everything we have if it meant Lily would be okay. As he said the words, Robert realized they were absolutely true. He would sacrifice everything for his daughter's well-being. The difference was that after reading Teresa's emails, he no longer considered his wife part of everything they had. She was just another obstacle to be removed. That night, alone in his home office while Teresa stayed at the hospital, Robert received a text from Mikey Middleton. Got some interesting preliminary findings. Can we meet tomorrow? Robert smiled as he typed back, morning works. And Mikey, bring everything. The demolition was about to begin in earnest. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.